I guess I want to respond to the everything is racist clips I've been seeing a lot on social media, particularly in this case the one about U.S. currency being created because of racism and slavery. That's patently false. It was created because we're a nation, first of all. The two alternatives to having a standardized currency are either having each state make their own currency or having banks issue their own currency. And both of those present clear problems that I probably shouldn't need to point out, but I'm going to anyway. The first is each state making their own currency. You're going to have trade problems right there. Massachusetts won't be able to trade with South Carolina very easily if they both have two different currencies. As with the single currency, it's uniformed. They can just take their products from one place to the other. They get paid the same amount. They don't have to worry about exchange rates. Number two, the banks doing it. You can't get paid with the banknote acting as currency from one bank, take it over to another bank and cash it. You have to worry about the banks honoring it for starters. You have to take it back over to that bank. It's only good in one area, and the banks were localized at the time. We didn't have Chase Bank and Wells Fargo, which is everywhere in the U.S. And then it comes down to taxation. And this is a really crucial point, too, because if you don't have a standardized currency, when you start taxing people, you start taxing people in products, not on products. And that would actually reinforce slavery, because now that's giving more power to an agricultural society. So now agriculture is what you pay in taxes, and that is going to reinforce slavery, which is a racist policy in America. And then we'll go back to banks. Banks existed in the U.S. long before the U.S. was the U.S. So that argument right there is just utter fabrication. It started off, as far as I know, during the Crusades, when organizations like the Knights Templar would do almost travel checks. You start over in France, you give your money over to them, they give you a quoted inscription, you travel all the way over to the Holy Land to make your pilgrimage, you can cash it in there, and that way if you get mugged by highwaymen along the way, your money is safe, your finances are still safe. And from there, just developed into a much organized banking system. So it's old. It's about 1,000 years old, at least in the U.S. And then currency is even older. Currency dates back to Mesopotamia, Samaria. That's been around as long as humans have been civilized. And again, for trade reasons. How much, if you want, an iron hoe, how much, how much wheat does that cost? It's hard to be uniform with that, as opposed to saying this is worth however many shekels. So both of them are older than the U.S., far older. Now let's get back specifically to what she's saying in the video. When you do that, when you look at the U.S., Alexander Hamilton wrote his reports on manufacturing. He's the one that created the monetary system, and in a small part created the Civil War. Now there's arguments that it's, was fought over slavery, and that's right, but it was fought over more than just slavery. And one of the things was who had the control, the agrarian southern states or the industrialized northern states. And Hamilton, in his report on manufacturing, he was pushing to make the U.S. an industrialized nation, which goes against slavery. We can get into sweatshops and wage slavery if you want, but really, he wanted to make our economy based off of manufactured goods, like a first world country, rather than the agrarian shit like a third world country. And that is, anti-slavery right there out of the door. We hired people to work in factories. We didn't use slave labor to do that. We used slave labor in the South, in the farms, and our agrarian culture. And one can argue that agrarian societies operate with a greater need for cheap labor than any other society on the face of the earth. Slavery is needed in agrarian societies, or was needed before you had carbines and giant motorized plows, when that was all manpower that did the agriculture. You needed cheap labor, otherwise you weren't going to make a profit. And it would take as many people to, like as much money to harvest the field as it would take, as you would begin by selling the grains, the food, whatever, the cotton in this case, whatever it is that you're growing. You need cheap labor to do it. Hamilton was against that. He was foursquare against it. He was pro-manufacturing. He's the one, that's why he's on the $10 bill. He invented the entire American monetary system. It was all done 100% to support manufacturing, which is anti-slavery. So what she's pretty much doing in the video is she is post-dating a lot of things that have already existed. She's post-dating them radically, like thousands of years younger than they actually are, hundreds of years younger than she actually are. She's being completely disingenuous about why we have the monetary system. And then when it goes down to the faces on the dollar bills, we didn't always have George Washington. Like, look at the dime. We have we have Franklin Roosevelt on the dime. Right before that, we had Mercury, the Roman god. The penny, we have Abraham Lincoln on the penny. We didn't have Abraham Lincoln on the penny when currency in the U.S. was being invented. He wasn't even alive then. We had an Indian head and a buffalo on the penny, and that's recent. Same thing with the Mercury dimes, both recent in American history. These things, like the presidents, have not always been on our currency. So even that claim that she's making right there, or that she's implying, isn't exactly true. Even what's on the currency, she's holding up modern currency, attributing that to 400 years ago. That it just doesn't work. So that's my video. I just wanted to summarize it because it's really starting to tick me off. I guess I'll post it on YouTube and then start using this as a link to argue against that crap, because really one of the worst things you can do is revise history. All right, what she's doing is revisionist history. It's changing history to suit your thesis. And when you start doing that, you stop understanding history. All right, if you want to make claims about this being racist, that being racist, fine, so long as that is actually what's going on. I think another one of them she was talking about later is tipping. That was class warfare. That wasn't about slavery. That wasn't about race. That was about class. That was about having to pay your employees less. And it wasn't about slavery at all. You had waiters, you had waitresses, you had people that relied on tips in areas where slavery was not legal. And that's a whole other thing right there. So pretty much what I'm saying is, get your history right, keep it right. That's an important thing. You don't need to rewrite history. Right? What you're doing is you are raping the past when you do that. Right? There are actual atrocities out there that you can be citing if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty about it. Right? Parts of Chicago were built with bricks and from the South that slave labor created well after we freed the slaves. That is a video that you can post, and that would be true. But you don't need to start twisting history, rewriting it, making stuff up, revising it, just so you can self-validate about how woke you are. That's not helping anything, that's hurting it.